Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Beyond the Evidence, the podcast where we dive deep into true crime cases, uncovering the facts and exploring the unanswered questions that keep us coming back for more. I'm your host, Marv, and I want to thank you for joining me today. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my YouTube channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. And if you'd like to support the channel, you can find links to my PayPal and Cash App in the description. Now, let's get into today's topic.
In the shadows, where the truth lies, Marv's on the case, with justice in her eyes. Unsolved mysteries, voices lost in time. She digs deeper, uncovering the crime. Beyond the evidence, she'll fight the fight. Beyond the evidence, where justice matters. Marv's the voice for the voiceless, breaking all the patterns, facts and theories, clues and controversy. Join the journey, uncovering the mystery. This is Beyond the Evidence, where justice prevails, with Marv leading the way. Truth never fails. Now get ready for this live stream. Super chat, highlight your message. Don't fall victim to the irrelevance. Hit that like, share, subscribe to Marv's Beyond the Evidence.
Hello, everyone. How are you? Good to see you all. As you know, the transcripts from the trial of the state of Indiana versus Richard M. Allen have dropped. I am going to start with the October 17th, 2024 hearing, which was right after jury selection took place. I don't know if everybody wants to hear about jury selection and what was asked and what wasn't. If you do, put something in the comments saying yes, and I can always backtrack. But I want to get into the hearing that was set right before the trial started and the actual testimonies. So I'm gonna start reading. I'm gonna read here for as long as I can tonight, and we're gonna go from there and see how far we get. There is a lot of volumes, a lot of pages, and we're just gonna go from there. So this is the hearing, as I said, that took place on October 17th, 2024. It started at 8:43 a.m. This is volume 9, page 109. But before we start, let me just say hello, Karen. How are you? Love your intro. Thank you so much. I love it too. Hi, Maria. How are you? Miracle Hearts. Nice to see you. All right. So, let me see here. I don't know what that was. Hang on. All right. That was an extra channel I had up, so I'm closing some tabs so that I don't get distracted. All right. So I'm going to start here and we're going to go through this. Okay, so the court says, all right, well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We are in the record in the state of Indiana versus Richard Allen, 08 CO1 2210 MR. And that's just his file, his case file number. Okay, so it says direct examination of Thomas Plantz, Plantz. And let me just move this around here so I can look straight as I'm reading this. And I will check comments and everything as I go. Okay. It says, I'll show that the defendant is here in person with all his respective counsel. The state's here by their elect and their deputies. I've been in touch with the bailiffs, and the jurors are slowly assembling downstairs. When everybody gets assembled, they have indicated they'll notify me so that we can have them brought up and we can swear them in. I know that we have several matters that need to attend to. I know the state's motion in limine regarding composite sketches was the only motion that required evidence, correct? Ms. Diener, yes. The court, okay, so why don't we take that one up and get started, and then we can break as soon as I've been advised that all the jurors are here. Is the state ready to proceed on its motion? Ms. Diener, yes. The court, is the defendant ready? Yes, Your Honor. And that's by Ms. Auger. The court, okay. Ms. Diener, state would call Thomas Plantz. Witnesses sworn in. Direct examination. Question by Ms. Diener. Mr. Plantz, would you please state your full name and spell your first and last name? Answer. Thomas Plantz. First name is Thomas. Last name is spelled Plantz. Question. Thank you. Are you a law enforcement officer? Answer. I am a retired special agent and forensic artist with the Federal Bureau one second. Of investigation. Question. Could you, for the court's benefit, go through briefly your education and professional history related to forensic art? Answer. Okay. I obtained a bachelor's of fine art degree from Indiana State University. I worked in the commercial art and printing field for approximately 5 years. In 1995, I joined the Indiana State Police, where I held the positions of forensic artist, trooper, sergeant, investigator, SWAT team member, and field training officer. I was in the Indiana State Police for approximately 9 years. In 2004, I joined the Federal Bureau of Investigation, where I took the position of special agent and forensic artist. I was assigned to the Knoxville division for a number of years. The Detroit division, the remaining 17 years of my career, were spent there. My investigative duties included national security investigations, criminal investigations, bank robberies, violent crime, public corruption, just a litany of investigations I'd be responsible for. I also had side duties of responsibilities where I was an instructor for the FBI, an adjunct faculty instructor from the training division, where I taught investigative interviewing, interrogation, forensic art, and law enforcement instructor programs. I was, let's see here. I also, during that time, I did temporary duty assignments in Washington, D.C. for a number of months in the counterterrorism division. I worked in a couple other special programs within the counterterrorism division throughout my career. And also as an instructor, I was stationed at the FBI's Academy in Quantico, Virginia, where I helped with the instruction of new agent trainees and intelligence analysts. I, during the Indiana State Police, I received advanced training in interviewing, forensic art, same thing in the FBI. I went to standardized forensic art trainings provided either by the FBI or other agencies. I attended over my whole career, I've attended numerous forensic art seminars or conferences as an attendee or also as an instructor. I retired in March of 2024 and currently am a consultant where I provide consultation for government agencies for national security investigations and also forensic art. Wow, that was a lot. This guy's got a lot of experience. Question. So, over the course of your law enforcement career, forensic art has been a responsibility or a specialization of yours, but always in conjunction with traditional law enforcement activity. Is that correct? Answer. Exactly. My primary responsibilities were a normal field agent and carrying on investigations. With regard to forensic art, a side note, I'm the first and only special agent in the history of the FBI that was qualified to actually perform forensic art for the FBI. One second. We have a civilian staff in our laboratory in Quantico, Virginia, composed of forensic artists, but I was the only actual investigator, a special agent to ever be qualified to do that because of my background and my education. Yeah, you're right, Miracle Hearts. It is cool that he could do all of that. And he said that he was the only one. So that's huge. Question. Okay, so how many forensic art images have you created over the course of your career related to law enforcement investigation? Answer. It would be approximately 400 is what I think the number would be. Now he's not sure, but he says approximately 400. Question. And is there a special technique that you use when working with a witness to create a composite sketch? Answer. Yes. It's an investigative technique called cognitive interviewing. Question. And in the area of forensic art, since you have been both an instructor and a student over the course of a long period of time? Is a cognitive interview something that every sketch artist related to law enforcement uses? Answer: no. It's encouraged, but there is no regulatory means of every forensic artist has to use a cognitive interview. So I know there are probably numerous forensic artists across the country or across the world that don't use a cognitive interview. Question: when you are instructing at a seminar for law enforcement, especially in the area of forensic art, do you instruct people on how to use the technique and the importance of it? Answer: yes. It is one of the primary components of my instruction and of the process that I use. It's also an accepted technique by a lot of national forensic artists. It's the cognitive interview, in my opinion, is just as important. A complete and thorough cognitive interview is just as important. And the results from that interview, as is the actual composite drawing, is so they almost have, in my opinion, the same amount of weight. Okay, so I'm going to read that over because I stumbled in there. He said, it's the cognitive interview, in my opinion, is just as important. A complete and thorough cognitive interview is just as important. And the results from the interview, as is the actual composite drawing, is so they almost have, in my opinion, the same amount of weight. Question: so briefly describe for the court what the cognitive interview process is. Answer: okay, a cognitive interview is where you, the interviewer, tries to elicit as much information from the witness by encouraging an open cognitive narrative or an open cognitive dialogue, where you educate the witness, give examples to the witness of what cognitive memory is, and explain the process. Explain the expectations of what the time frame and what it takes. But ultimately is to take that witness back into the context of the moment of the incident or the event that they were involved with. Quite literally trying to put them back in time to that moment. So it's important to start off with. And when I do an interview, I'll talk to someone probably for, it's been hours, just getting to know them, finding out what I call their operating system, how they process information, how their memory seems to work with them, whether they're a visual or a literal person. I have to say that I actually like how he does that. I am a visual person, while many of you out there are literal people. So when he uses both techniques or asks how they see things and remember things, that's important. He says some people like to tell stories, some people draw maps. And when you talk to them in that initial phase, you get a feel of how they present their material. And I try and then tailor the interview towards their strengths and away from their weaknesses. But ultimately, I want to take them back to that moment, actually, even before that moment of the event, the hours and the time leading up to the event, through the event, and even after the event, explaining to them that they need to tell me their account of the event with as much detail as possible, that no information is insignificant. sights, sounds, smells, feelings, emotions, the environment, everything that they experience in that event. I want them to tell it in the highest degree of detail possible, even if they feel that they even if they feel that those details I might not want to know. I want to know anything that's in there. And by doing that, it takes them through that process, through time, and that content reinstated, context reinstatement. So, oftentimes in police interviews, as investigators, we want to know certain facts like what did the person look like? What was what car were they driving? What was the plate? You know, all these things that we need for our investigation. And oftentimes people jump right into that moment, which is almost like jumping in the middle of a story that you're telling without having I guess, the environment and the layout of the whole story ahead of time. And what's important to realize once you get to know the person and talk to them and build rapport with them, you understand how they process information. And maybe, for an example, maybe someone starts talking about the smell of the event, if there was gunpowder or blood or something else that triggered them. Even though I think in my mind that's not important to me as an investigator, I want them to do that because the most important, they're called memory codes, that when a witness or person experiencing something, they form a number of memory codes. And the memory code that I might want as an investigator might not be the primary memory code that the witness is going to feel is their priority. So the important part is to let them unpack their memory codes that are important to them. And when that happens, I describe them as dominoes. So once that initial domino, which is more important to the witness, once that falls, it starts to knock down other memory codes. And eventually, it'll get to the things I want to know about. I don't know about you, but I find this fascinating. And I think that he explains this very well to where anybody can understand it. He says, but during the cognitive interview, I'm not interrupting. It's not a standard police interview. I'm not asking questions. It's not a back and forth. We've set the scene. I had them lay out their whole cognitive narrative. I encourage them along the way, guided retrieval, but I don't interrupt. You can imagine when you've told a story to friends or family that you're halfway through it and somebody stops you and asks a question and it messes up your cognitive recall. It messes up your flow and you forget what you're talking about. So it's very similar to that. I let them say the whole open narrative, guide them through it, and then when it's done, then I can circle back and maybe start whittling down into questions that I want to know about. So if you imagine a triangle, and at the top of the triangle is the open narrative, sight, sound, smells, feelings, everything that the witness experienced, and I'm just along for the ride listening. Then when it's over with, then I can go back and I can take down, whittle down, or funnel down specific points that I want to know about. Maybe it's about a vehicle. Maybe it's about a location. In composite drawing, it's about the individual. It's about not just the face, but everything I can derive from the individual, from the witness, about the suspect from the witness. So it could be their demeanor, their mannerisms, their speech. if there was other people interviewing or interacting with them. It goes beyond just the physical of what they were wearing. It's what I call a human profile builder. We try and check as many of those boxes as possible when I whittle down that way. The communication that's happening with me, between me and the witness, is more clear in my mind. So the drawing, composite drawing portion of it doesn't happen till much later in the interview after the cognitive interview. What do you guys think about that? Do you like how he explained that? I mean, I'm a visual person, but we're reading this, but I can actually visualize what he's talking about. So to me, and I didn't get to hear this part. I missed this day of the hearing. So a lot goes into it. Yes. When you think about doing a composite drawing, you think they just go in there and describe the features and flip through different eyes and mouths and everything, and it's not like that at all. Hi Misty, how you doing? It's so more intense than just having somebody draw somebody's face. You know what I mean? So it's very, very interesting. Question. So it sounds like that's very different from your traditional law enforcement interview for gathering data from a witness about a particular event. Answer. That's correct. Question. And so what factors impact a witness's observation that you are trying to arrive at for the purpose of your composite sketch? Answer. Well, I think one of the basic things to understand is that through memory, we do three things. When we encounter an event, the individual encodes it, they store it, and then they can retrieve it later. And I'll break that down. So, encoding means an event happens. Let's say that one of the lights in here fell from the ceiling and crashed to the ground. I see it. I encode the information. Then I turn around and I store it. Because if you think of this as file cabinets, so I'm seeing what's happening, I'm encoding it in memory codes, I'm storing it in a file cabinet, and then later someone will ask me about it, maybe an investigator, and then I'll have to go back and have to retrieve that file. So the considerations when dealing with any individual is we call, encode, store, and retrieve in our own individual way. And when I say that, it's a person's education, their background, their race, their gender, and their age, all their experiences in their life with trauma, good things, bad things, that all make up who you are as an individual. So, for back to the example, if that light fell, everyone in this courtroom would encode that based off of their experiences in life. You would also, where that each individual person stores the information in that file cabinet. You do it from the same filter or lens of your life experiences. And then when you're asked to retrieve that later by an interviewer or investigator, where you decide to put it in that storage area and how you decide to bring it back, that is also influenced by all those different factors and that filter or that lens. So memory is not an audio video recording. So there could have been a camera up there that watched that light fall and crash, and it would have had the actual event. But everyone in this room would tell the story that encode that information differently based on their experiences. Interesting. Question. And so, are there also things like the opportunity of a witness to observe just environmentally that would impact their sketch, or whether you even do a sketch for that particular person? Answer. Sure. So, would that witness have access to actual information? Were they close enough to see an event? If that light fell here and somebody was out in the hallway and they heard it, did they actually see it? So, would they be able to give an accurate description of what happened? So, we look at lighting conditions, environmental conditions, even the physiological, psychological, and environmental factors that we're going in. So, if all of us in this room saw that same event with the light falling and you didn't, you slept maybe a half hour last night, or you're really hungry and you're going through a divorce, or there's other stressors, or it might be the light fell next to you and you were injured and caused trauma or brought back other memories. So all those things are gonna affect it. How? Again, how that was encoded, stored, and retrieved. Question. And what about the difference between interviewing and getting a sketch from someone who is the victim of a violent crime versus someone who is a witness? Not even realizing that at the time they're witnessing anything in particular. They see someone and later they're asked to recall that person because they're a person of interest, but yet they saw no violent crime. Answer. Right. Now, again, that's another factor that can add in. Because if you're violently assaulted face to face with someone, maybe 5 or 10 minutes, you've got that fight or flight, that animalistic response to what's going in. So you're the person that's going through the traumatic experience, might have imprinted that memory and might have imprinted that information a little bit more because it was threatening. It was a very significant event, a life. And when you're viewing another person in a communication, whether it's a negative or positive communication, you're evaluating someone's facial features and their eyes. And they say the eyes are the windows to your soul. You can tell when someone is angry with you or someone is pleased with you. You can read that in their face. So that imprints a little bit more usually with someone that's involved in a violent crime. But if it's an act or if it's an incidental contact, if I'm just walking down the street, this morning I might have walked past 3 or 4 people. I might have noticed them and noticed a little, but I didn't spend a lot of time really imprinting that information because it really wasn't significant in my world at that time. So it can differ. Again, that's the axis of what did they see? What was the lighting? What was the circumstances? What was the distance? All these things. Question. And so, as a forensic artist, if you're called upon to do a sketch with someone who would say to you, I only saw the person for a few seconds, I didn't get to see their whole face. Either part of it's covered, or they're looking away, or they're looking down, or there's some, obstruction. Here you are, an artist, being asked to draw a full frontal picture of a person. How do you address that as an artist? Answer. I think you have to do the cognitive interview. Normally, when the police or any investigators contact me, they'll give me a very brief description of what happens. And I don't want a lot of it because I don't want to put any undue bias in my head about what the actual circumstances is. because I don't want to put any undue bias in my head about what the actual circumstances is. But when I interview that person, do that cognitive interview, hang on a minute. Okay, let me find my spot there. But when I interview that person, do that cognitive interview, I'm evaluating. I'm asking questions to determine, did they have a good view? Did they see these things? And then throughout that, I'm making an assessment of, is this going to be beneficial to do an actual composite drawing? Now, the benefit of the cognitive interview, you're still going to get other information, and you can make a determination at that point whether a drawing should be done or not done. And there have been occasions in my career where I've interviewed someone that I was told initially that they want me to do a composite drawing. And then after the interview, I realized, this is probably, we're not going to get much out of it. And it might maybe cause more harm than good doing the interview. So you have to make that determination kind of on the fly. Hey, Frank Meister, how you doing? Question. Okay. And you talked about the fact that the person may not be able to give you enough information to do a sketch. What if the person is doing their best and they can't really pin down a particular feature? What do you do with that? Well, there's a couple of things. Again, we can rely upon the cognitive interviewing process. Again, a lot of people will tell me initially, I don't know if I can do this because they see it on TV. And if somebody asks me to draw my brother right now, who I've known my whole life, my first instinct is like, oh, this is going to be difficult, even though I know exactly who he is and I do it for a living. So when I start to talk to them, I start to evaluate, do they have the information there, period? Sometimes, if they say they don't, we can work things through. And as I talk about the cognitive interview, you start off in the beginning and those dominoes start to fall. And sometimes details will come out later that the witness didn't even realize they had stored, because they might have stored them haphazardly or very quickly under stress. But yeah, sometimes after that interview, you just can't. There's not enough detail. It could go either way. It's just something you have to evaluate if. Question. Doesn't it, yeah, doesn't it also impact, say, the use of that sketch then thereafter if the person was unsure about certain aspects, but even though you draw an entire face? Answer. Oh, absolutely. Question. Okay. Answer. We could get to the point where we start doing a drawing and maybe we get 50% through the drawing and it just feels like we're not getting anywhere. And it doesn't, no matter how much through the cognitive interview and drawing and making revisions, that we just don't seem to be getting a good quality drawing. Maybe we'll just stop. Or maybe we'll finish the drawing and we'll tell I'll tell the investigators that I just don't feel like this was a productive, complete interview. And maybe this composite drawing is not what you should be using right now. I will also point out, now that I'm thinking of it, when I do a composite drawing, It's not maybe like you see on TV where someone talks for 5 minutes. I sit there and draw, and then ta-da, flip it around. It doesn't work that way. It's the person is sitting right next to me. There's we've already talked for probably hours, and there's this open dialogue where we're going back and forth making revisions. So it's actually, I encourage it to be a team between the witness and I working on a common goal to get the best rendering of the person. Question. So does all this effort you put into it at the end remove the subjective factors that you bring to the table, or subjective factors that the witness brings to the table? Answer. No, no. Those all those subjective factors remain. And as you just mentioned, not only does the witness bring all those subjective things from their whole life experiences and how they process information and memory, but I bring that in. So all my experiences and all my education and everything I've done in my life that makes me who I am, I'm listening to the account and making interpretation from their statement through my filter and through my lens. So you've basically doubled up on the subjectiveness. My ability to do an interview, good or bad, my ability to actually, my artistic ability on how well I can draw, how poor I can draw, that communication. So that's the subjective. It's so it's coming at it from two sides. Question. And that happens with any forensic artist. Would you agree? Answer. Any forensic artist? Absolutely. And quite honestly, any investigator who conducts an interview is going through the same thing. In a sense, a composite drawing is like an illustration that accompanies an interview. Like a book has illustrations, a composite drawing is just a way of expanding a cognitive interview. Question. And so the communication is key to maybe sorting out some of those subjective or personal biases a person brings to the conversation. Answer. Right. Question. Not intentionally, but just answer. Right. Question. Life experiences. Answer. It can be usually unintentional. And again, it's what we all have them. I say that when I teach my classes and when I approach the work that I do. You have to accept and acknowledge up front and explain to the witness that about the subjective nature of it. And then we have to work through those things as much as we can. But we can never completely negate the subjective nature. Was it him then that did the old BG guy sketch? Probably not. But I think we're going to get more into that maybe as we go, that question will get answered. Question. Hang on a minute. Question. Okay. All right. Question. And how do you deal with asking a witness to estimate the age of a particular subject? And what's your experience with that? Answer. Well, again, when it comes down to where I'm actually asking fine questions later, clarifying questions after the cognitive, the most important thing to do is ask open-ended questions. Like, for example, a really bad question is to say, well, how old is that person? By me saying that, I'm interjecting my experience. I'm saying old into the conversation. So I could be biasing the actual results by saying old. What I should say is, can you estimate the age of the person? Can you estimate the height? Those types of things. Now, when it comes to age, race, gender, there, through my experience and through research that I've read, that when somebody has to make an either identification or whether they have to do a composite drawing, which deals with recognition, not identification, it's recognition. That when people have to guess or try and estimate ages across their own demographic, it becomes more difficult. So I'll give you an example. If someone is a very young person and I'm interviewing maybe a 15-year-old, and I'll ask them, can you estimate their age? I've had this actually happen. They said, oh, they were really old. They were old. And I go, okay, can you give me a guess on age? In my mind, I'm thinking to me, old is 60, 70. When I asked them, can they estimate the age? They said, oh, yeah, they were old. They were 30. I'm like, okay, well, that does happen. Question. There's a big difference between drawing a 30-year-old and drawing a 60-year-old. Answer. Exactly. Same thing. If they're older, trying to guess younger or actual racial lines, genders, it doesn't see the it doesn't mean they're completely inaccurate. It just seems like the more disparity in the demographic. It seems like a it's harder for the witness to articulate accurately those types of things. Question. Okay. Answer. And there's other factors that can, like the amount of time that they had with somebody, whether it was a brief thing, whether it was traumatic, which we've already talked about. So those all affect it. Question. And you've also talked about the skill of the artist, the skill of the interviewer. All those are variables. Answer. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that. Question. The skill of the artist and the skill of the interrogator. Those are also all variables. Answer. Absolutely. I've I will give you an example. I know I've known people that were some of the most amazing artists that I've ever known. Really talented, artistic people, and they've entered into the forensic art world and they struggle because they don't have the interviewing skills or the experience. I also know about people that had a really talenting that I also know people that are really talented interviewers and investigators that have dabbled into the forensic art world and they struggle because they don't have the artistic skills. So every artist, every basketball player, every football player, like we all have our different skill levels. So every forensic artist is not the same based on their skill level, artistic skill level, and their interviewing skills, just like anything. Question. Does having multiple sketches from multiple artists in a particular investigation raise concerns? And could you share with us what those might be? Answer. Yes. Again, in my experience and research that I've read, that causes a problem because all those subjective things that I talked about earlier that make us all individual and how that between the witness and all the things that the witness possesses and all the experience that the artist possesses, it would pulls into that communication. Now you're multiplying that because now you're entering maybe another witness and another artist. So you're adding all their life experiences and all those things that they do through encoding, storage, and memory. So you have extrapolated the subjective nature of it. So, yes, it can become a problem. Question. And so, how do you know when the composite is complete? Answer. It gets to the point where during the final drawing phase and following up questions, there's a number of things. I'm watching the behavior. I build a baseline of behavior of the witness early on through our initial rapport building part of the interview, through the cognitive interview, and then through the drawing aspect. I'm seeing how they react to it. I've had people physically that have been victims of violent crimes, have physically gotten ill, have thrown up in interviews, have become irrational and scared, and uh sometimes that's a good indication something's going on there. So I'm watching their behavior and I'm asking them. I'm actually doing an evaluation system based on, I use 1 through 10, and I'll ask the witness at multiple phases during the interview. Okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 meaning this drawing looks nothing like the person that I saw, and 10 meaning it looks like the person I drew, where are we? So then I can start to gauge if we're making progress. Oftentimes, I have to tell them because of my position and I'm an FBI agent and I'm a forensic artist, sometimes people can be, I don't know if the word is maybe wanting to please you or exercise to what you're doing. So I have to keep reminding them that you have to tell me the truth. You have to tell me whether this is good or bad or we're getting somewhere. You're not going to hurt my feelings. This isn't about making a pretty picture. This isn't about me. This is about what you saw. And keep reassuring them that it's whatever the rating they feel they need to give, that's important. We have to be accurate. So, yeah, probably 3/4 of the way through the drawing process again, we're working together as a team. I'm going to start asking that question of, on a scale of 1 to 10, where are we? If it's, a 3, 4, or 5, we need to keep working. If it's starting to go 4, 5, or 6, we're getting somewhere. If it gets to the point where maybe we're not getting past that validation and we're not getting up to an 8, 9s, I start to think, okay, well, maybe this isn't working. Maybe they didn't have access. Maybe they didn't have a good view. Maybe they just don't have it in their toolbox to get it any higher. So again, it's the limitation of what their experience and what they can communicate to me and what I can record. I will state that if someone were to say maybe 10 minutes into a drawing, they said, oh, it's a 10, I'm going to question that because I don't think I ever had a 10 in my career. And I don't think I've ever seen a 10. A 10, the way I define it is looks exactly like the person. And because I can't plug a cord into my head and plug a cord into the witness's head and download exactly what they saw and experienced, then the subjective nature of it's difficult to get to a 10. So I usually question if it's a 10, and then we'll talk through it. And usually it probably goes back down a little bit. But so yeah, that's how I evaluate whether it's complete. And when it's complete, there there's follow-up questions. Sometimes after 3 or 4 hours, that sometimes these can run, the witness can get fatigued. They can get tired. I get fatigued. I get tired. So sometimes if there's a number of revisions they would like me to complete, I'll say, hey, let's end the interview. I'll go back, I'll make some of these revisions, and then I'll call you or I'll email you or I'll make some communication of what I've done to the revisions on the images. It gives them a chance to rest. The interesting thing about cognitive memory is then that once you get the cognitive flow going and people start remembering things, sometimes things can be omitted inadvertently, but they go home, they get rest, and they get something to eat, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, they smell something or they see something that cognitive tricks a cognitive memory code to fire. They'll call me up. They'll go, you know what? I just remember, their ears look like this, or there was a tattoo here. When I went to sleep last night, I just remembered it. So sometimes I'll continue the investigation and the drawing over a couple hours or days. Wow. This is fascinating to me. All right. Question. So, how is a composite sketch that then intended to be used? Answer. The composite sketch should be used as an investigative tool or what we like to call a lead generator. It is. It's not used for identification. It's used for recognition. So imagine if there's a suspect. Just describe maybe an African American male, approximately 30 years old, 6 foot. Well, you could go out in the Fort Wayne area, and if you put your investigative feelers out, you might find hundreds, if not thousands, of people that fit that description. By doing a good cognitive interview and potentially a composite drawing, you can narrow that focus down to maybe 10 people, maybe 3 people, depending on the area and the population. So that helps law enforcement focus on a direction, focus on an investigative lead. It gives them a guess, again, a direction to follow. But it's not something the police, once I do a composite drawing, the police don't walk down the road in the city and hold it up to people. And when they find somebody that looks like it, they don't arrest them, grab them, put them in cuffs and arrest them. It doesn't work that way. And it wouldn't work that way. It's just to get them in the direction. Then they can use their other investigative tools, whether it's a forensic sciences or cell phone data or any interviews, any number of investigative techniques that they can use then to focus on the particular suspect. So the composite drawing just gets them headed in that direction. What do you guys think about that? Because that's pretty specific what he's stating. He's stating that you're not going to look at it and say, this is definitely the person. You're going to look at it and say, well, that person could be it. But then they have to investigate further to see if that person has any other reason why they might truly be the suspect. So we were focusing on these two sketches all these years and doing side by sides, and that's why we found numerous people that could look like the sketch. Does that make sense? And that's why Doug Carter kept saying a sketch is not a photograph, meaning the sketch was not going to look exactly like the person. It kind of makes sense now. Question. Okay. And so you're saying it's not for identification. Have you ever had a situation where your sketch was used for identification purposes of a suspect, defendant in a criminal case? Answer. No. Question. And would you advise against that? Answer. Yes. Question. And is there something that you do? Well, let's talk about release to the public of a sketch. Are you a participant in the decision whether that gets released to the public? Answer. I don't make the decision. I'm often asked to give my input on how the interview went. When I'm done with the interview, I write a report that summarizes my cognitive interview. Because sometimes there's a lot of things from a cognitive interview that come out that maybe haven't even been told to the police yet, because the cognitive process hadn't happened. So I recorded it in an interview report, attach my notes, and obviously the drawing, and I present it to the investigators. And they'll ask for my advice, and I'll give them some. You know, I believe the interview went well. I believe there's some validity to the or confidence with the quality of the completed composite drawing. But it's not my decision whether it gets out to the media. I've had made suggestions. Don't put it in the media, because I've had numerous cases where I felt like it's maybe a beneficial drawing in cognitive interview, but maybe the drawing is still a little too broad. And I've encouraged them, well, maybe you could circulate this through the law enforcement community as opposed to putting it in the media. And it's worked numerous times in that environment. But ultimately, it's up to the law enforcement agency or the investigators. I do give them a written statement that I formulated over my years, and I always encourage them to, if it's going to be released to the media or anyone, that this statement should accompany it and should be placed in the press release or whatever. Question. Can you tell the court what your disclaimer is? Answer. Would you mind if I read it? Question. That's fine. Answer. I want to make sure that I'm getting it correctly. The statement that I provide for them is, this composite drawing is an artist rendering of an unknown suspect produced from a witness description. It should be viewed as an approximation of a suspect's appearance rather than an exact likeliness. And even to dovetail on that, when I do a drawing, I can draw photorealistically, but I intentionally draw it in a very sketchy type of technique. So there is no ambiguity on whether that's a photograph or some type of enhanced image from modern techniques. I want whoever views this, whether it's the public or law enforcement, to see it and say, oh, yeah, that is a drawing. This is an approximation. So if somebody views it and they don't say, hey, that doesn't look, or that looks like such and such, what I'd rather them do is look at it and say, that could be such and such. So, question. But you would tell us then that this is simply a tool for recognition of a potential suspect, not the investigation does not stop there. Answer. No. Question. And the picture that is drawn, the composite sketch, despite all of the efforts that's put into it in order to elicit this memory from a person who sees someone of significance potentially cannot stand alone? Answer: no. Again, it's an investigative tool that points somebody in a direction. And again, as an example, the hundreds of composite drawings that I've completed, I think I've only had to testify in court maybe 3 or 4 times, and it was about what I'm doing now, the process, not an identification. Question: and wouldn't it be dangerous then to take a composite sketch and display it to the jury and say, this is a composite sketch of our killer? Wouldn't that create an imprint in their mind? Answer: it could. Question: and when you have multiple sketches by multiple witnesses, as we do in our case, doesn't that increase the danger when you have multiple sketches? Answer: absolutely. Because the subjective nature of the initial drawing itself and the first, and then you add another one, it's just multiplying that subjective nature. So it could be very confusing because it is my interpretation of an artist and an interviewer of a witness statement. So it's not direct evidence. Question: and that would be true for any composite sketch by a forensic artist because they're all coming from the same basic circumstances: subjective witness statement, subjective artist rendering, trying to put together something to help advance the investigation, correct? Answer: that's exactly it. Again, it's a forensic artist, not forensic scientist. Ms. Diener, thank you. The court. Who's crossing from the defense? Ms. Auger? So this is the cross examination of Thomas Plants by Ms. Auger. Question: good morning, Mr. Plants. Answer: good morning. Question: sir, would you agree with me that it's important to attain unbiased and uninfluenced sketches? Answer: yes. Question: okay, and you don't want to contaminate a sketch with outside influences? Answer: yes. Question: okay, because sketches can and are routinely used, maybe not in your cases, but they're admitted in criminal cases all the time. Answer: I'm not familiar with they're actually admitted in court. I've always understood it to be hearsay. Question: okay, but if sketches had been admitted in courts, you're not familiar with that? Answer: I'm sure they have been admitted in court before. Question: okay. Answer: I just don't have specifics of it. Question: okay. In fact, they've been admitted in states all over the country. Are you aware of that? Answer: I'm not. I don't have anything to support that, but I wouldn't dispute that. Question: okay. And it's important to have unbiased, uncontaminated sketches because they are not only used in court proceedings, but also to identify suspects. Answer: when you say unbiased, how are you phrasing it again? Question: unbiased, uncontaminated sketches. Answer: okay. I think my opinion would be it's important to do as much as you can to remove bias and contamination from it. But because of the subjective nature of humans and everything I've already explained, you can't remove all of it. Question: right. And only way to introduce contamination into a drawing would be to show a photograph. Answer: absolutely. Question: and another way to induce, I can't speak this morning, it's too early, Another way to introduce contamination into a sketch would be for you, as the artist, to look at a photograph of a potential suspect prior to the drawing. Answer: oh, absolutely. I've had times where people have asked me to do a composite drawing. Investigators, they have another, already have a suspect, and I refuse to do it. And if people show me a photo of a possible suspect, I won't do it because you've just entered in the highest level of bias you could have. So yes, absolutely, that would be bad. Question. Okay. And you're the same Thomas Plants that did an interview with Sarah Carbaugh and provided a sketch, a composite sketch. Answer: that's correct. So there you go, Miracle Hearts. We just answered your question. So he did do a sketch with Sarah Carbaugh from this case. Question. Okay, all right. Well, let's get back. Your goal is to compose a sketch that accurately reflects the individual the witness saw as best as you can. Hey, Mustang. Answer: that's correct. Question. Okay. And you wouldn't want to compose a sketch that did not truly represent an individual identified by a witness. Answer: absolutely. Question: that would be harmful? Answer: oh, yes. Question: innocent people could be suspects in a crime they didn't commit. Answer: absolutely. Question: and innocent people could be convicted of crimes they didn't commit if that sketch were used in court. Answer: potentially. Question: okay, now you said you want to. I was writing as fast as I could. Answer: okay. Question: so bear with me for a moment here. Let the witness say their whole wide open narrative before you ask questions. Answer: that's correct. I agree, Miracle Hearts. This guy, I'm learning so much from reading this on sketches. It's amazing. And he definitely knows what he's doing. Absolutely. Question. Okay, now you said you want to. Oh, okay. Question. So bear with me for a moment here. Let the witness say their whole wide open narrative before you ask questions. Answer: that's correct. Question. And that can take hours? Answer: it can, yes. Question. And part of that initial hours interview is building rapport with someone. Answer: yes. Question. And finding out how individuals encode, store, and retrieve information in their own individual way. Answer: yes, to the best of my ability. Question. Sure. So that you can elicit that and compose a sketch that accurately captures their memory of a suspect or a vehicle or whatever. Answer: exactly. Question. Okay, and you can also choose not to create a sketch. Answer: yes. Question. Okay, she loves to put okay and yeah in front of her stuff, in front of her questions. Question. Now you spoke with Sarah Carbaugh on June 19th, 2017 at the Carroll County Sheriff's Office. Answer: yes. Question. Okay. And the purpose of that was to produce a sketch or perhaps see if you could produce a sketch. Answer: that's correct. Question. And that was 4 months and 6 days after the girls disappeared on February 13th, 2017? Answer, yes. Question, okay. And sir, within 4 minutes of starting your recorded interview with Sarah Carbaugh, had you spoken to her prior to that? Ms. Diener, Judge, may I object? I didn't think the scope of this particular hearing is about a sketch in conjunction with Sarah Carbaugh, but about sketch art in general and whether it would be relevant or excluded for relevance or hearsay or another rule of evidence, not to discuss necessarily a particular sketch related to this case with this particular witness, since we have a multitude of sketches. Ms. Auger, well, Your Honor, I think they're asking to exclude the sketch that he composed based on an interview with Sarah Carbaugh. Ms. Diener, we're asking, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jennifer. I'm sorry. Ms. Auger, I believe that the specifics of how the sketch was rendered could certainly be important to the court's analysis. Ms. Diener, this motion is about any and all sketches related to this investigation and how they might be used or not used in this case, not a specific sketch. The court, well, all right, sustained. Ms. Auger, pardon? The court, sustained. Question, sir, are you familiar with the International Association for Identification? Answer, yes. Question, okay. And it is the oldest and largest forensic association in the world. Answer, yes. Question, and you, in fact, you spoke at their August 2019 conference at the Peppermill Resort. Answer, yes, I did. Question, okay, and you spoke on composite drawing interviewing essentials. Answer, that's correct. Question, and you're familiar with the standards and guidelines for forensic art and facial identification? Answer, I have read them, yes. Question, and are those standards that are applicable to forensic artists? Answer, they are best practices, but it is not a governing regulatory. They're a certification. Question, but they're best practices. Answer, they are best practices. Question, okay, and these guidelines tell you that a witness may be instructed that her signature will be the feature that allows her to identify the image in court if necessary. Answer, I've seen that policy, yes. Question, okay, and that's a best practice? Answer, best practice. Question, for introducing the sketches in court, is that correct? Answer, that's correct. Question, okay, and in fact, those standards also say that once the image has been developed with the assistance of the witness and has been properly documented, it is perceived as a piece of evidence. Answer, I remember reading that, yes. Question, okay. Answer, as a best practice, and I will add to that. Question, that's all right, thank you. Answer, okay, all right. Question, sir, you said it's also common to use a scale at the end or towards the end of a cognitive interview to determine how closely that sketch resembles the person identified by the witness. Answer, right. Maybe a validation system, yes. Question, okay. That was kind of a clunky question, but I think we're there. Answer, I gotcha. Question. All right. And a 10 would be an exact replica of the individual the witness is trying to describe. Answer. Yes. That's the way I utilize it. Question. Okay. And so would you agree with me that would be a very good rendering or a description of a potential suspect? Answer. A 10? Question. Yes. Answer. Yeah. As I stated before, I don't believe that's attainable. That's my perspective of it. You can't. A 10 is an actual 100% recreation of that person, and I've just never seen that done. Question. You haven't seen it, but it doesn't mean it hasn't happened. Answer. I've been in this business for a while, and I go to these conferences, I keep up, and I don't think I've ever seen a composite drawing that looks exactly 100% like an individual person. Question. Okay, again, you just haven't seen it. Answer. No, I have not. Question. Doesn't mean it hasn't happened, right? Answer. I guess. Question. Okay, I'm not done. Answer. Okay. Question. Sir, is it important to you personally that you always follow your own best practices? Answer. I say they're best practices, yes. But again, sometimes you have to adapt to the human. Again, as I stated, we're all individuals, we're all different. So they are a guideline, yes, to follow. Question. Okay, but it would take a long time of interviewing a witness before you were able to determine whether you had to maybe modify some of those best practices. I would think. Take you a minute to figure that out? Answer. Can you say it again? I want to make sure I answer this correctly. Question. Sure. I presume it would take you a while to figure out whether you need to modify those best practices. It would take you a while into your interview of a witness because you would want to follow those if you could. Answer. Yes, absolutely. I think that's accurate. Question. Okay, but you yourself don't always follow those best practices, and you didn't in this case, right? Answer. No, I did follow this in this case. Question. Okay, well, do you recall, and you would never tell a witness it was okay to cheat? Answer. No. Question. You wouldn't? Answer. Well, sometimes I use a word probably to relate it to video games when I'm talking to younger people. Like I use the phrase cheat code. So you can bypass some things or you can do things to elicit more information by doing certain things. Let me articulate. So, for example, well, I can't talk about the individual case, but yeah, I would never tell someone to cheat. But I have used the word cheat code before. Question. Well, in fact, you have told people, adults, it's okay to cheat, right? Answer. Not that I'm aware of. I don't know what you're talking about. Question. You told Sarah Carbaugh it was okay to cheat. Answer. I. Question. Do you recall that? Answer. No, I don't remember that. Ms. Auger, may I approach Your Honor? The court. Do you have an exhibit? Miss Auger, I do. I marked it as Defendant's Exhibit A. The court. Have you given it to Jody? Miss Auger, pardon? The court. Have you given it to the reporter to mark? Ms. Auger, I can. Question. Sir, I'm showing you what I've marked as Defendant's Exhibit A. Is that you? Answer. Yes. Question. Okay. Is that you interviewing Sarah Carbaugh in this case? Answer. Yes. Ms. Auger. Okay. And I would play this. Move to admit Exhibit A, Your Honor. Defendant's Exhibit A offered. Ms. Diener, I have no objection. The court, I'll show A as admitted without objection. Defendant's Exhibit A admitted. Okay. So we are going to start on top of page 139 tomorrow. I want to keep these between an hour and a half, because people, they can't sit that long and listen that long, but they want to hear it. So, hey Anthony, stopping in. I'm so glad you're here. The Resident Evil AMC, I subbed. Thank you so much. If you missed the first part of this, I would go back and listen to it, because this guy explains things in a way that I think anybody could understand it. And hearing how he does his investigations into making a composite sketch is very, very informational and intriguing. It's nothing like what we watch on CSI or Law and Order or any of those shows. So, yeah, we always welcome everyone. So I'm so glad you're here. So if you didn't hear the beginning, you'll have a chance to go back and listen to it. I have to give blood tomorrow morning, and then depending on what time I get back, I will probably start another live and finish this up. Because in an hour and a half, we went from page 109 through 138. So we're doing pretty good. Georgia, well, welcome. I'm from Wisconsin. Haven't been to Georgia yet. We'll try to get this all wrapped up tomorrow. Like I said, I'll do another hour and a half of reading, and then maybe take a break, and we may need a third part because there's over 200 pages in here. And then we will get to the actual testimony. Great job reading. Thank you. I think all that time reading Tabitha's documents have helped me. Yeah, love Wisconsin. All right, everybody, thank you for joining me. Make sure you hit that like button. Share this out to other people that are interested in the Delphi case. I'm sure all the other creators will start reading this stuff. But I'm going to try to, since I'm not working, I'm going to try to read as much as I can every day. So it's a lot to get through. Lots to get through. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining me. You have a good night, and I'll see you tomorrow morning. Bye.